I never thought the day I collapsed and ended up in the ER would reveal the truth about my family. My parents never showed up, and my sister twisted everything into her own spotlight, turning my pain into her performance. Growing up in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina, my family always looked picture-perfect from the outside. We lived in a quiet cul-de-sac where neighbors waved from their porches, and weekend barbecues were almost a tradition. My parents, Linda and Charles, loved playing the role of the supportive, tight-knit family. They showed up at community events with wide smiles, the kind of people who seemed to have everything under control. For most of my childhood, I bought into the illusion. I was the oldest, and my little sister, Valerie, was the golden child. She was 3 years younger than me, with a talent for singing that seemed to charm anyone who heard her. My parents would sit in the front row of every recital, applauding like she was destined for Broadway. They posted videos of her performances on Facebook, racking up likes from relatives across the country. Me, I was the quieter one. I loved writing, short stories, poems, even the beginnings of novels scribbled in notebooks. Teachers praised my creativity, sometimes even displaying my essays on bulletin boards. But at home, my accomplishments got a polite nod at best. "Oh, that's nice, Daniel," Mom would say, glancing at my paper before turning back to Valerie. "Val, sing that new song for us again." At the time, I brushed it off. Families have favorites, right? I told myself it didn't matter. I still had my friends, my journals, and a sense of belonging, at least I thought so. Holidays reinforced the image of stability. Thanksgiving dinners were loud and bustling, with cousins crammed around the table and Valerie in the spotlight, singing carols by dessert. Dad carved the turkey like a TV commercial, Mom poured wine, and everyone laughed. On Christmas morning, Valerie always got the biggest pile of presents. Designer clothes, expensive headphones, even once a karaoke machine. I got things too. Gift cards, a sweater, a new set of notebooks. It wasn't nothing, but it felt like an afterthought. Still, I told myself I didn't mind. I loved seeing her happy. That's what family was about, wasn't it? But every so often, there were cracks. Like the time I won a regional writing contest in middle school. I came home beaming, certificate in hand, ready to show them. Valerie had just landed a solo in her choir performance, and as I held up my award, Mom glanced at it, smiled faintly, and said, "That's good, sweetie. But wait until you hear Val's big news." The conversation shifted, and my moment vanished. I laughed it off, pretending it didn't sting. Or the time in high school when I sprained my ankle during gym. Dad picked me up, but instead of sympathy, he said, "You've got to toughen up, son. Look at Valerie. She never lets anything stop her from rehearsals." Again, I swallowed the hurt, convincing myself they loved me in their own way. That was the pattern. Subtle neglect dressed as normalcy. Valerie basked in the spotlight, and I lived in the shadows, telling myself it was fine. At least we looked like a happy family to the outside world. And maybe that's why it hit so hard later, because when the illusion shattered, it wasn't just about neglect. It was about betrayal. But in those early years, the false stability kept me blind. I believed we were solid, that underneath the favoritism and the dismissive comments, we were still bound by love. If only I'd known how wrong I was. The first Rayoul warning bell didn't come crashing down in some dramatic explosion. It was quieter, subtle enough that if you weren't paying attention, you might have missed it. But for me, it was the beginning of realizing that my family's loyalty wasn't what I thought it was. It happened the summer before my sophomore year of college. I had come home to save money, working long shifts at a local bookstore. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady, and I loved being around the smell of new paper and the quiet hum of readers lost in their worlds. It was my sanctuary after weeks of classes and exams. One evening, I came home sweaty and exhausted after a 10-hour shift. Valerie was sprawled out on the couch in the living room, scrolling through Instagram on her brand new phone. Mom sat nearby, helping her pick out dresses online for an upcoming singing competition. "Hey," I said, dropping my bag by the door. "Guess what? My manager at the bookstore just offered me more hours, maybe even a chance to help with the store's marketing. He says I have a knack for writing ad copy." I was smiling, hoping, just hoping, that maybe for once they'd look at me with pride. Instead, Mom barely glanced up. "That's nice, honey. Did you bring in the mail? Val, hold that dress up, let's see if it's your color." Dad walked in just then, loosening his tie, and Valerie immediately chimed in. "Dad, guess what? They bumped me to the finale slot for the competition next month." His face lit up. "That's my girl. You'll bring the house down." He kissed her forehead, then turned to me. "Daniel, did you pick up groceries on your way home?" The shift was instantaneous. My news forgotten, swallowed whole by Valerie's announcement. I told myself it was nothing, but the knot in my stomach grew tighter each time it happened. The second bell rang a week later. Valerie had a dress rehearsal for the competition, and Mom insisted I drive her there since she was too stressed to focus. I agreed, mostly to keep the peace. When we arrived, Valerie stepped out in her gown, and people swarmed her instantly. Teachers, friends, even strangers who had heard of her incredible voice. I stood off to the side, watching. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd look over, acknowledge me, even wave. But she didn't. She was glowing in the spotlight, and I was invisible again. That night, when we got home, Mom gushed to Dad about Valerie's performance. "She's going to be a star," she said, eyes shining. "We need to start planning her future. Music school, auditions, maybe even voice coaches in New York." And then Dad said something that stuck with me, words that slid under my skin like shards of glass. "Daniel will be fine on his own. He doesn't need much. Valerie is the one we should invest in." I froze in the hallway, listening. They weren't talking about me like their son. They were talking about me like I was an afterthought. A burden to manage, not someone worth believing in. It was the first time I felt a real crack in the foundation. For years, I had convinced myself that their neglect was just oversight, that deep down they cared. But hearing it out loud, hearing my father dismiss me so casually, it rattled me. I tried to confront them the next day, but the moment fizzled. "Dad," I said, "why did you say Valerie's the only one worth investing in?" He blinked at me, caught off guard, then laughed. "Don't take things so seriously, son. You're independent. That's a compliment. You don't need hand-holding like Val does." Mom chimed in, "Exactly. You're strong. She's delicate. Strong. Independent." Those words sounded flattering on the surface, but they were just excuses. Excuses for why they didn't bother showing up for me, why they funneled all their energy and money into my sister. That was the moment something inside me shifted. It wasn't just favoritism. It was a hierarchy. Valerie was at the top, bathed in praise, while I was expected to carry myself quietly in the background. I brushed it off, told myself I was imagining things, but deep down, I knew. That was the first warning bell, and it was deafening. College should have been a time for growth, freedom, and discovery. For me, it became a slow chokehold, because the more I tried to carve out my own identity, the more my family tightened their grip, pushing me deeper into the shadows of Valerie's glow. By junior year, I was juggling a full class load and 2 part-time jobs, the bookstore back home on weekends and a small tutoring gig on campus. I worked until my body ached, but it gave me something I never had at home: control. My paycheck, my schedule, my independence. But independence came at a price. Every phone call from my parents was a reminder of what I wasn't. They rarely asked about my classes, my grades, or the articles I had started publishing in the student paper. Instead, the conversations went something like this: "Daniel, can you help pay Valerie's competition fees this month? She's under so much pressure already." Or, "Val needs gas money to drive to auditions, can you spare some?" At first, I said yes. I told myself it was temporary, that helping her would ease the tension. But it became constant, expected. My parents treated my part-time paychecks like their backup plan. When I pushed back, Mom guilt-tripped me. "She's your sister, Daniel. Family sacrifices for each other." Dad added the dagger. "Valerie has a future. You just write stories. Don't you want to see her succeed?" The message was clear. My dreams were expendable. Hers were sacred. Slowly, my world shrank. Friends invited me to parties, weekend trips, or late-night study sessions, but I declined more often than not. I couldn't afford to spend money, and I didn't have the emotional energy to explain the weight I was carrying. Instead, I buried myself in work, stacking shifts, saving scraps of time to write in my notebook between classes. The isolation worsened whenever I went home. Valerie's trophies lined the mantelpiece. Her framed photos covered the walls. Guests were treated to her highlight reel at every dinner. Videos of her singing, stories of her dedication, plans for her future. Meanwhile, my achievements collected dust. The published article I sent my parents? They never mentioned it. The scholarship I won for my essays? That's nice, Daniel. But look at Valerie's new performance dress. It was suffocating. One night, during winter break, things reached a breaking point. I had just finished a late bookstore shift and drove home through freezing rain. When I walked into the living room, Valerie was sitting with my parents, showing off a flyer for yet another competition. Dad turned to me. "Daniel, we need you to cover the entry fee. It's only a couple hundred." I was bone-tired. My wallet nearly empty. I can't, Dad. I'm barely covering my rent. Silence fell. Valerie pouted, Mom's eyes narrowed, and then Dad's voice hardened. Don't be selfish. Your sister works harder than anyone. The least you can do is support her. Something in me cracked. I work 2 jobs. I'm *ling myself just to keep up, and all you see is what I don't do for her. Do you even care about me at all? The room froze. Mom finally spoke, her tone sharp. Stop being dramatic. Valerie never complains. That was it. That was the narrative they clung to. Valerie was the saint, I was the problem. After that night, I stopped trying to win them over. I stopped volunteering my achievements, stopped expecting recognition. I withdrew into myself, focused on survival, and tried to find scraps of validation elsewhere. Through professors, through the small audience reading my published essays, through the rare friends who noticed the exhaustion in my eyes and said, "You okay, man?" But even those connections began to fray, because Valerie wasn't just the center of my parents' world anymore. She started intruding into mine. She found ways to belittle me in front of mutual friends, posting on social media about how some people never grow up, or how writing isn't a real career. My classmates saw it. My co-workers saw it. It was humiliating. The walls closed in. By the time I collapsed in that bookstore months later, it wasn't just exhaustion. It was years of neglect, years of carrying the weight of a family that saw me as nothing more than a resource for their chosen star. And yet, the cruelest part was still to come. Because when I finally ended up in the ER, hooked to machines, pale and shaking, my parents didn't come. And Valerie? She found a way to make even that moment about her. The night I collapsed at the bookstore is seared into my memory like a brand. It was supposed to be a normal closing shift. I was reorganizing shelves, the scent of fresh coffee from the cafe drifting through the aisles, when my vision blurred. My knees buckled, and suddenly the world tilted sideways. Books clattered around me, and the next thing I knew, co-workers were shouting my name, calling for help. When I came to, fluorescent hospital lights glared above me. My body felt heavy, like I was pinned to the bed. A nurse adjusted tubes running into my arm and whispered gently, "You're lucky your co-workers acted fast. Severe exhaustion, dehydration, low blood sugar, your body basically shut down." Her words blurred in my ears. Exhaustion, dehydration, things I'd been warning myself about for months, but ignoring. Because stopping, resting, meant giving up ground that no one else would defend for me. I turned my head toward the doorway, half expecting my parents to be there. They always said family came first. Surely, now that I was lying in a hospital bed, they would come running. But the doorway remained empty. Hours passed. No calls. No messages. Finally, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. My heart leapt until I read the words, "We heard what happened. Valerie's rehearsal tonight ran long. We'll check on you tomorrow." Tomorrow. I lay there staring at the screen, the weight of the truth settling over me. I could have died on that bookstore floor, and my parents had chosen to prioritize Valerie's rehearsal. The nurse must have seen the devastation on my face, because she sat down gently beside me. "Do you have anyone else we can call? A friend? A relative?" That was the moment I realized just how alone I was. But the worst sting came later that night, when Valerie herself showed up, not with flowers or comfort, but with a camera. She breezed into my hospital room wearing a designer jacket, phone in hand, recording a video for her followers. "Hey guys," she chirped, angling the camera to catch my pale, exhausted face. "Visiting my poor brother who overworked himself. Please send thoughts and prayers. By the way, don't forget my performances next week. It would mean the world if you all came out to support." I stared at her, speechless. My chest burned, not from the drip, but from rage. "Valerie," I croaked, my throat raw. "Turn that off." She frowned, annoyed. "Relax, Daniel. I'm just trying to show people how strong we are as a family. This could get me so much engagement. Everyone loves a comeback story." I couldn't believe it. My near collapse, my hospitalization, she had twisted it into content for herself. She didn't even ask if I was okay. She just saw an opportunity to shine brighter. When she finally left, posting selfies in the hallway about how stressful family emergencies are, I lay there shaking. My parents hadn't come. My sister had turned my pain into her performance. And for the first time, I stopped asking, "Why don't they love me?" and started asking, "What will I do about it?" The revelation was brutal, but undeniable. I had spent my whole life clinging to a family that would never show up for me. They didn't see me as someone to love. They saw me as background noise, or worse, as a tool. Lying there in that hospital bed, I made a vow. I wasn't going to play along anymore. I wasn't going to beg for scraps of attention or hand over the pieces of my life so Valerie could build her empire. If they wouldn't show up for me at my lowest, they didn't deserve me at my best. That was the moment everything changed. The day I was discharged from the hospital, I walked out with a band around my wrist, a packet of instructions about nutrition and rest, and a resolve burning hotter than ever. My body was weak, but my mind was sharp. Something inside me had snapped when I saw Valerie turn my collapse into content, and I wasn't going to let it go. The first step was simple. I stopped answering their calls. For years, I had been conditioned to pick up immediately, to respond to every request. But now, every time Mom or Dad called, I let it ring. Every time Valerie sent me a link to her latest performance or fundraiser, I ignored it. For the first time, silence was mine to wield, and it rattled them. At first, Mom texted guilt trips. Family sticks together, Daniel. Don't ignore your sister, she's just trying to share her success with you. Then Dad's messages turned sharper. Stop acting childish. You owe us more respect after all we've done. All they had done. My bank account told a different story. See, while lying in the hospital, I had plenty of time to think, and to tally. Every loan they demanded from me for Valerie's competitions. Every temporary contribution to cover her travel or her outfits. I dug through old bank statements, piecing together years of small withdrawals that added up to thousands. I wasn't just exhausted. I had been bled dry. And that's when I decided, if they treated me like background noise, I'd use their own ignorance against them. I started saving everything. **TS of texts where they demanded money, receipts of payments I'd made, Valerie's public posts bragging about new dresses or trips, funded by family support. I even asked a friend from the bookstore, Natalie, who had seen me collapse, to write down what she witnessed, including Valerie's shameless filming in the hospital. Piece by piece, I built a record. The second step was harder, drawing boundaries out loud. When Valerie called me one evening, her voice sugary sweet, asking, "Hey, can you spot me $300 for a new mic? It's an investment in my career." I didn't hesitate. "No," I said firmly. Silence. Then a scoff. "Wow. Really supportive, Daniel. No wonder you're stuck in dead-end jobs." Something in me flared. At least my jobs are mine. At least I'm not leeching off everyone around me. She gasped like I'd slapped her, then hung up. Within minutes, I got a text from Mom. "Don't talk to your sister like that. She's under pressure. You're supposed to be her rock." But here's the thing. Rocks don't bend, and I was done bending. The final step was more daring. If they wanted to parade Valerie as the family's shining star, I was going to show the cracks. I wrote an essay, not for class, not for a grade, but for myself. I titled it The Invisible Sun. In it, I detailed what it meant to be overlooked, to give everything while receiving nothing, to collapse from exhaustion only to be turned into someone else's storyline. I didn't use names, but the parallels were obvious to anyone who knew us. When it was done, I submitted it to the student newspaper. And when it was published, it spread across campus like wildfire. Professors shared it. Students stopped me in the hallways, saying, "That was powerful." One girl whispered, "I thought I was the only one who felt invisible in my family." For the first time, my voice carried louder than Valerie's songs. And I knew it wouldn't stop there. Because Valerie wasn't about to let me have the spotlight. She, and my parents, were going to retaliate. But I was ready for them. The fallout from my essay was faster than I expected. Within a week of publication, the piece had gone semi-viral on social media, shared by classmates, reposted by advocacy groups that talked about toxic family dynamics, even mentioned by a local journalist who said, "This story needs to be heard." Valerie was livid. She cornered me on campus 2 days later, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her phone as she thrust it in my face. "What the hell is this, Daniel?" she shrieked, waving the article on the screen. "You're trying to destroy me. People know this is about me." I held my ground. "It's about me. About what you and Mom and Dad have done. If the shoe fits, maybe it's because you wore it." Her face twisted, and before I knew it, she stormed off. That night, I got the call. Mom, her voice sharp with fury, "How dare you air our private family matters for strangers to gawk at? Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for Valerie?" I laughed bitterly. "Funny. None of you worried about humiliating me when you bled me dry, ignored me in the hospital, or turned my collapse into social media content." Then Dad's voice boomed through the phone. "You've gone too far, Daniel. You will take that article down, or we'll cut you off completely." Something inside me snapped. You can't cut me off from something I never had. I've been on my own since I was 15. The only thing you ever gave me was proof that I can survive without you. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then Mom hissed, "You're ungrateful. Don't bother coming home." Click. And just like that, I was officially exiled. But here's the thing, they underestimated me. The local journalist who'd seen my essay reached out for an interview. At first, I hesitated. Going public felt terrifying, like I was stepping into a storm without cover. But then I remembered lying in that hospital bed, alone, and I said yes. We met at a cafe downtown. I told her everything. The favoritism, the money they demanded, Valerie's shameless stunt in the ER, the years of neglect. She listened intently, scribbling notes, then asked, "Do you want me to use your real name?" I hesitated only a moment. Yes, it's my story. I'm done hiding. The article went live the following week. The headline read, "The Invisible Son, One Student's Fight Against Family Betrayal." The reaction was explosive. Students, professors, even strangers flooded my inbox with messages of support. Some shared their own stories of being overshadowed by golden siblings. Others simply said, "Thank you for speaking up." But not everyone was supportive. Valerie and my parents launched a counterattack. Valerie posted teary-eyed videos on Instagram, painting herself as the victim of vicious lies. Mom and Dad spread rumors to relatives that I was mentally unstable, that I was jealous of Valerie's success. It all came to a head when I returned home briefly to grab the last of my belongings. The moment I stepped through the door, the air was thick with hostility. Valerie sat on the couch, arms crossed, her phone recording. Mom stood in the doorway to the kitchen, lips pressed tight. Dad paced like a storm cloud ready to burst. "You've disgraced this family," he thundered. "You've made us a laughingstock." I set my box down calmly. "No, Dad. You did that the moment you chose to abandon me in a hospital bed. I just told the truth." Valerie lunged forward, shoving her phone in my face. "Say it to my followers. Admit you lied. Right now." I pushed the phone away. "You want a performance, Valerie? Here's one. I'm done. Done funding you, done chasing your approval, done pretending this is a family." Dad's face turned red, veins bulging at his temples. "Get out. And don't come back." For once, I didn't beg, didn't flinch, didn't apologize. I just picked up my box, walked out the door, and let it slam behind me. It was the loudest silence I'd ever heard. And though my hands shook as I drove away, a strange calm settled in my chest. The showdown was over. The ties were cut. And for the first time in my life, I was free to imagine a future without them. Walking away from my parents' house for the last time felt like stepping out of a long, suffocating tunnel into daylight. The sky was still gray, the air still heavy, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't tethered anymore. For weeks after, though, the silence was deafening. No texts, no calls, unless you counted the occasional hateful message from Valerie's fans accusing me of jealousy or trying to destroy her career. My relatives, swayed by my parents' version of events, either ignored me or sent cryptic notes about how I should apologize and make peace. But peace, I realized, was never going to come from them. It had to come from me. I doubled down on my writing. My essay had already gained traction, but the journalist's follow-up story blew everything wide open. She painted a picture not just of me, but of an entire pattern many readers related to, the forgotten sibling, the scapegoat child. Suddenly, my inbox was overflowing with people saying, "This is my story too." For the first time, I wasn't invisible. Professors who had always admired my work pulled me aside, encouraging me to expand my writing into a book. A local support group for children of narcissistic families invited me to speak. Even a small publisher reached out, interested in compiling my essays. The validation wasn't about fame or recognition, it was about finally being seen, on my own terms, for something real. Meanwhile, Valerie's empire began to crumble. My article didn't destroy her overnight, but the cracks were showing. Venues quietly backed out of her performances. Her social media following dipped as people noticed her self-centered posts contrasted sharply with my raw, unflinching honesty. She still had supporters, but the blind adoration had dimmed. Mom and Dad. Their obsession with protecting her meant they ignored the backlash completely. They doubled down, painting themselves as victims of a smear campaign. But their circle of influence grew smaller. Friends who had once fawned over Valerie now kept their distance, whispering about how strange the whole family drama seemed. And me. I flourished without them. I picked up more shifts at the bookstore, not because I needed the money as badly, but because it grounded me. The same aisles where I had once collapsed now felt like a place of rebirth. My co-workers became my family, checking in on me, celebrating my milestones, pushing me to chase bigger dreams. Eventually, I saved enough to move out of my cramped campus apartment and into a modest one-bedroom with a desk by the window. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every rent check, every piece of furniture, earned without compromise. One evening, sitting at that desk, I opened a fresh notebook and wrote the words, "I am not invisible." That became the first line of the manuscript I would one day publish. But the real closure came unexpectedly. Months later, I was volunteering at a community writing workshop, helping teenagers craft short stories. One girl, maybe 15, stayed behind after class. She hesitated, then said softly, "My parents only care about my brother. They tell me I'm nothing. Reading your essay made me feel less alone." Her eyes glistened, and in that moment, everything crystallized. My pain, my collapse, my family's betrayal, it wasn't just suffering. It was fuel. A way to light a path for others stumbling through the same darkness. I bent down to her level and said, "They tried to erase me too. But you're not erased. You're here. And your story matters." Her small smile was worth more than every trophy Valerie had ever flaunted. So when people ask me now if I regret it, cutting ties, walking away, airing the truth, I say no. I regret staying silent for as long as I did. Because I finally understand, family isn't defined by blood or by those who shout the loudest. It's defined by the people who show up, who see you, who choose you. My parents didn't come when I was lying in a hospital bed. Valerie made my pain about herself. But I survived. I spoke. I built something stronger. And as I look around my little apartment, papers spread across my desk, messages of gratitude filling my inbox, I know one thing for certain: they tried to bury me in silence. But I walked away, and found my voice.